Intro and welcome to our panel. I am joined by four of my former colleagues from Workday, and I'm excited just to reconnect, hear about what they've been up to. For today's session, we're going to dig into topics like adoption models, documentation, extended systems. But before we jump in, let's start with a round of intros. So if you could tell us your name, your role, how long you've been working on design systems, and then one boring fact about yourself. So we'll just go in the order of the slides with Nicole starting.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nicole Choi, and I'm a designer on the Canvas Design Systems team at Workday. And I've been working on Canvas for about 2 years full-time, but before that I had a hand in the early days when Canvas was still like a little baby. My boring fact about myself is I am allergic to saffron. So hand it over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm Tom Cunningham. I've been working with Workday on the Canvas Design System team for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I worked in the industry working with lots of international clients, creating design languages, design systems with them as well. So lots of experience in that area, but still very eager to learn still. A boring fact, I found this difficult to do, but I'll settle on a boring fact that I can only wear a certain type of sock. So they're just very boring cotton socks, but if people give me like swag and stuff like that, it's wasted on me because I just can't wear it. It just makes my feet sweaty. Sorry about that.
Love it.
All right, well, I'll take a mental note to never give you socks, Tom. Hey everybody, I'm Alex Nichols, the Design and Technology Director on Canvas at Workday. I've been working on the Canvas design system for about 4 or 5 years now, but been working on some form of design systems for quite a bit longer than that. Boring fact about myself, I really like to lie on the floor between meetings. I find it's a great alternative to standing up at a standing desk. I don't know, it just feels great to like stretch the back and lie on the floor. So whenever I work from home, whenever I do a trip down to our head office or anything, I always miss my floor time between meetings.
Love it.
Cool. I'm Alan Smith. I'm a design system engineer on the Canvas team. I've been working on Canvas and Canvas Kit for about 1.5 years, but I've been working with design systems for a while before that as well. My boring fact, I know that sweatpants and pajama pants are having a sort of a renaissance. I honestly feel most comfortable in a pair of jeans and my cowboy boots. So that's what I'm wearing today. It's really nice. So yeah.
Oh, wow. That is unique. I like it. And hello, everyone. My name is Clara. I'll be your host for today. I'm a designer advocate at Figma, and I've been working in design systems and speaking perhaps with some of you for a few years now. Boring fact about myself, my favorite sport is walking. And my friends sort of give me crap about it when I say that, but it's just true. All right, moving on. So this is our first theme for today, everything around design system flexibility and enablement. We've got 3 themes total, so stay tuned. So I know that the name of Workday's design system is Canvas. And if I recall correctly, it's now about 5 years old. So happy 5-year anniversary. I wanted to start with understanding what the landscape of design is at Workday. I think this is going to help illustrate for everyone who the design system serves. So I know, Nicole, you're a founding member of the design system. So let's start with you.
Sure. So when I started at Workday 7 years ago, our team is a fraction of the number it is today, and we were mostly centralized in our Pleasanton, California office. Our Dublin, Ireland design team was still really small, but growing. And at the time, we were called the UX tools team. So we were responsible for designing and building all the reusable core components where our UI developers for our apps teams to use to build their products. And we started doing this by creating and maintaining component sticker sheets and page templates in Sketch. And like we all know, those Sketch files would grow to like version 70 plus of Sketch files. And we would partner directly with apps designers and their developers on their projects. So from start to finish, design concept to final spec, anything that was new had to go through a pretty thorough Canvas review by our team. And if an apps team needed a component that we didn't already have, our UI developers were responsible for creating and maintaining it. So this meant that a lot of our day-to-day was spent co-designing with apps designers on projects, and they could span anywhere from weeks to months. And we had divided up this work of reviewing and kind of rubber stamping app designs amongst ourselves. So our Workday design org was expanding really rapidly. Our community was growing larger, becoming more global, and the products our designers were working on also grew. Workday started acquiring other companies, and that expanded our product suite as well. So we kind of faced this problem of figuring out how we could best scale our services.
Yeah, cool. Alex, what about from your side?
Yeah, on the kind of developer and code side, we started off just focusing on improving the design and design language of Workday, but we kind of quickly realized that developers could make use of a lot of the stuff that we were building. So in addition to those sketch libraries that Nicole mentioned, we started working on code components as well. And this turned into Canvas Kit, which is our kind of open source code library. We open sourced it back in 2019. And now our design system serves, a big audience: designers, developers, PMs, technical writers, marketing, third-party groups, with it being open source, that kind of thing. And now we've had this kind of really rapid growth of audience and adoption. So we've really needed to figure out how to scale in the last couple of years. And it became really impossible for us to have our hands on everything. So this has kind of led to a shift in prioritizing resources for self-service and really like enabling product teams at Workday.
Yeah, and I'm sure since 2016, when Canvas initially launched, the governance model has probably shifted over the years. So I'm curious what adoption looked like initially and how it's changed. Alex, I'll kick it back to you.
Sure. Yeah, originally Canvas as a concept kind of tried to create guidelines and like cover the entire product. And we were just kind of synonymous with all of Workday's UI. And that was kind of needed at the time to kind of bring everything together into one visual language. But we realized that over time, as we evolved, it doesn't necessarily lead to the best experiences when you really push that consistency is everything. It can lead to things being a little bit watered down and that type of thing. So now that we're kind of moving away from a compliance model and rubber stamping, we're focusing more on, like I said, empowering consumers to kind of build UIs that are catered to their use cases and their products while still kind of building on top of the foundation of Canvas. And we've found that, it leads to much happier product teams with more autonomy and happier end users. And yeah, that's kind of what we're focusing on now, just enabling speed and scale and empowerment.
And can you remind me what rubber stamping means?
Sure, yeah. So basically just being the like end approver for, is this like Canvas approved? Every single product that goes out, you have to give it the rubber stamp. And we still collaborate with product teams and give them feedback, but we try to not make it like a hard compliance kind of thing. We don't want to stifle their innovation.
Yeah, got it. Nicole, what about for you? What did that adoption look like initially and how has it changed?
Yeah, like Alex mentioned about the rubber stamping approach, where everything had to be explicitly approved by our team. It worked in the early days when the design org was small and centralized, but we outgrew it. And we would understandably get pushback from apps teams that sometimes we were being too strict or that our rigidity didn't allow them to innovate. So we became known to some people as the people that said no a lot or slowed them down in their design or development process. And obviously this is the opposite of what we want our design system to be. So it really made us like reflect as a team to try to understand how we could pivot and best serve our growing design org and allow them to be creative and possibly feed some of that good stuff back into our design system. So we really realized that we needed to get the foundation solid so teams could feel confident that they're making informed choices without someone on Canvas explicitly assisting them hands-on like we used to. So we've been recently prioritizing revamping our design site so designers and dev can be guided to the right solution, have an easy way to access the tokens and components needed to use it. So in shifting to this like model of self-service, it also means that we're establishing trust in our apps teams to make these decisions without us kind of hand-holding. And Canvas in that sense is providing the tools, all the materials and basic instructions, but apps can still feel free to feel empowered to tailor and build what they need.
Yeah. Did anyone want to add anything to that? Cool. I really love that idea of self-service, like self-service design systems where you can help guide people to the right solution. And it sounds like it sort of started with this enforcement model, which you found wasn't super scalable. How then did you go about making your design system flexible? Tom, let's start with you.
Laura, yeah. So I think I can share the screen if you want to follow me on.
Oh yeah,
Figma.
I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
follow you on the Figma. Are you in there?
Yeah.
Maybe I just need to reload real quick.
Okay, cool. Anyway, so I think Workday is a big company, and it's like an ecosystem of products covering a broad range of areas. So like from form or spreadsheet based tools to video and interactive learning based products as well. So there can be quite a difference in the use cases of each product area. And like in an ideal world, we have a centralized component library with covering every single thing that every single product area needs, but that would be amazing, but it's just not realistic at the scale that we're at. If you're a smaller company just focusing on one niche product, say for example, it's probably a bit easier to do that. But for the challenge, for the reasons I mentioned there, it's a bit trickier for us. So that's working now. Okay, so what the approach that we take now is the components that like how Canvas works is that we have very general, very universally useful components that can be assembled into pretty much anything that they need, that our users need. So we've got like components, assets, we've got tokens. I'm sure everyone is kind of familiar with this. People who have design systems have some variation like this. And what this means is that it allows a lot of flexibility. I'll just scroll over to the side, but there's a kind of there's a scale then as well. So there's kind of a very general, highly flexible, when you've got things that are kind of broken down into their building blocks pieces, they're very easy. You can build lots of things with them. But in some of the product areas that we deal with, say, for example, this is a Workday Learning, they've got a very tailored use case that they need this card. It's got all this very specific details that they need. And that's kind of like a tailored suit. You know, we've got the stuff on the left here, the general stuff is kind of the raw materials, but if you have a tailored suit, it fits you really well, but maybe not everyone else so well. So there's lots to be learned from that. And I think personally, when I joined the Workday, I paired up with the learning team. They were revamping the whole product, and it was a really good onboarding experience for me into Workday and the Canvas design system as well, because I've worked with others in the past. But it's kind of like, I suppose if you're when you're working on a design system, you can have a very high level or almost a hypothetical view of things. Whereas when you're on the ground with the teams actually creating them and pairing up with them, it's a very practical experience. You can actually see, you know, where the rubber meets the road, where things are kind of unclear for them or what they actually need. So that was really beneficial for me onboarding. I would recommend if you can do that in your companies, if you have a bit of buffer and you can allow someone to pair up with a team like that, you can get very specifics because there's kind of universal truths in the specifics. So yeah, and I think, and obviously they benefited as well because they had a partner in the Canvas design system team. So I think that might answer that question there.
Yeah. That embedded model of like embedding a design system person in a product team, that's super interesting. I'm sure there's so many learnings, and I really love this spectrum too. Oftentimes design system teams really have to cover that entire spectrum, and it's sort of difficult. So Alex, from your end, I'm curious how, from your side, how you're keeping the design system flexible to support something like this.
Yeah, kind of continuing on the thread that Tom mentioned, where there's such a variety of different teams and products at Workday. Just even looking at something as fundamental as our tokens, we've realized that what we kind of had originally built with Canvas years ago didn't necessarily scale to meet all of the needs of those consumers. And as our product has become more complex and our design system has evolved, we've realized that tokens can't really be a fixed set of values, which is kind of what we initially tried to do when we were being very prescriptive for the Workday UI. So to give some examples, colors need to work in a variety of contexts. Originally, we kind of just designed for our web UI, and now we need to start thinking about dark mode and high contrast mode and theming and all that kind of thing. Spacing needs to expand and collapse depending on the vision of a user. Density of UIs is a really big thing at Workday. So for like a homepage or a dashboard where things may be more spacious, or even a marketing site, compared to like a super data dense form entry page or a table view or something like that, our tokens need to kind of shift and scale to support those different densities. You know, even thinking about like type hierarchy, you kind of want that to change on a marketing site versus a data dense page. So that's something that we've been looking at a lot over the last year, is kind of evolving our token definitions to be more functional and more of a system that kind of scales to different contexts.
Yeah, instead of rigid numbers, that totally makes sense. Alan, what does that look like from your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to what Nicole mentioned on the design side of components feeling like they were stifling designers. They also, like engineers, had a similar experience. And I think also what Tom said about tailoring, you know, our components previously were very rigid and enforced a lot of our design system decisions in them. And while they were useful for 80 to 90% of use cases, there was still that 10 to 20% that needed that tailoring, that to make it that really nice fit with the product. And our components had trouble getting that last bit. And so, excuse me. So, yeah, I think like, because of the way the components were structured, it made it difficult for them to, it made it difficult for developers to sort of use those components in a way to where they could get there. So often they were ended up having to build their own without using our components, where they just use our tokens directly and built their own things. And that's really not the developer experience that we want, and really not what we want for teams. So we sort of took a step back with the recent major release of our components, and we sort of adopted this term that's common in the React world. It's called compound components, but we have a particular meaning for that within our team and our organization. And basically we're creating composable components, and we're separating out the visual styles of the components from the behaviors. And that allows teams to take the parts of particular components that work well for them, and then sort of piece those together. And again, we want to provide flexibility with our components without going completely free form, where developers have to build all of those things together, without really much guidance or support from us.
Right. Yeah, got it. We've been talking a lot about flexibility, and ideally a designer or developer, they can just start working with your components right away and adjust them as needed. I sort of want to transition to talking about extended systems, which is our second topic. So what's the difference there? What's the difference between flexible systems and extensible systems? Alex, let's start with you.
Sure. So yeah, I kind of mentioned earlier that Canvas, when we initially released it, we tried to cover our entire product. And now we're kind of shifting to a new mental model that supports what we're calling extended systems. These may have, you know, other terms throughout the industry, but that's what we're calling it at Workday. I can show a quick graphic in Figma if you want to follow me.
All right, there we go.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, basically these product systems, they contain, or product extended systems contain patterns and specialized components that are kind of built on top of the foundations of Canvas that you know, we've established and our brand guides have established. And for example, you may have like a unique pop-up that is specific to a product, but it's built using Canvas components and it's following Canvas's like notification patterns, that type of thing. But it's too specific a use case to go into Canvas. There may be one or two other teams that want to use it, but not, you know, it's not something that makes sense across the whole product. So this would be like a good candidate to start building an extended system around. And a lot of the work that Tom did, it being embedded with the learning team, was kind of building out one of our initial like proof of concepts for an extended system. And the idea here is that they cater to the individual contextual needs of the user within that product, and account for that product's tech stacks and tech limitations. And then at each level, they're kind of required to support their own documentation and design libraries and code libraries and that kind of thing. And they're sort of structured like a little mini design system on top of Canvas. And to touch on someone's comment or question earlier, this kind of creates like a hybrid community model rather than just having Canvas as like a hub and spoke model with us at the center. So that's really empowered teams to start sharing with each other and not necessarily dealing with the Canvas design system as a bottleneck. And previously, anything that was shared between teams, had to be contributed through Canvas, and anything that was too specific just got duplicated between product teams. So now with kind of our oversight and guidance, and as we share kind of the experience that we've built up over the last 4 or 5 years with all these teams, we're kind of building a framework to enable standards in how the teams work together and share with each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. Avoiding those dupes and redundancies are like antithetical to design systems. So yeah, that's awesome. Alan, what about from your end?
Yeah, I think with extended systems, our goal was to provide components that teams can sort of build on top of and build their own components on top of them. And so a lot of what we've done with compound components has been providing those smaller atomic pieces so that other teams can build their own component libraries on top of Canvas Kit. And some of those are, excuse me, some of those are component libraries that support just a particular product or set of products, and then some of them are more general across a lot of Workday, and so they expand like a lot of products, like products you wouldn't even associate together normally in Workday. So yeah, so providing those lower level pieces so people can put it together in whatever way that they're ready. I think part of extended systems is that help looks different for like what is empowering to one team can also be can cause another team to flounder. So depending on the design maturity and the level of support that different teams have, we want to be able to provide those patterns and examples and guidance and components that will work out of the box for teams that just need it to work. And sort of they want to stick very close to Canvas. But for teams that are really wanting to push the envelope and to go further out, in the deep water, we want to be able to provide that flexibility for them to sort of move Workday's UI forward, but also move our design system forward as well. So yeah.
While you were talking, I just put on this frame of Legos and it just matched perfectly. You said right after that, you're like out of the box, and then, certain customers can build out. So, there's a children's sets and then really advanced sets. And you sort of need to provide different things for each of those. Okay, yeah, exactly. But anyway, I digress. Nicole, what about from your end?
Yeah, so I think like Alex mentioned, that shift from one team, our team, being the ones creating and maintaining all the components to be more of a shared responsibility amongst the whole community has just been huge. I think a lot of people back then would just turn to us for anything and just got unmanageable and just slow. So, but ultimately, if there is a solution that exists out there, I think teams will use it. Not only because it's more consistent, but also just reusing is overall just more efficient and usually less design and dev work. And I don't think anyone's necessarily trying to build a one-off solution just because. So a big job for us on Canvas has not been to take on the job of documenting everything, especially business cases where we're not the subject matter experts, our apps designers are. So instead, we're trying to provide resources to help teams get started on how to create their Figma component libraries, building on top of our core components and tokens, also providing good examples of how to create spec templates that cover not only the specs themselves, but also usage guidelines, accessibility, bidirectionality considerations, and also just make it a easier structure for folks to contribute back to the design system. So providing more of those like getting started materials, but less so taking on all of that management ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, thank you. Okay, everyone in the audience who's a design system designer can, just take a sigh of relief. You're not responsible for every single experience across your entire company. And I love how you pointed that out. Like, you just can't know the business cases for every product that you support. And so I feel like that's something so important that the entire design org sort of needs to understand. That way you can provide the correct things for them to build on top of the system. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Tom, okay, your end, what's the difference between extensible and flexible systems from your side?
Well, obviously I'd echo what the rest of the folks said there, but I'm an analogy person, so I'm always that's how my brain works. I'm always trying to I'm on a quest for the perfect analogy, but I don't think it exists for every single scenario. But for me, as I mentioned earlier, the scale of Workday, the variety of the different product areas and stuff like that, I kind of think of it like the European Union, so we're kind of we're a cohesive kind of group, but there's also individual cultures, there's individual ways of doing things within the different product areas. So like the culture in Ireland is very different to the culture in Germany and in Italy and Spain and stuff like that, but there are commonalities in some of the currency that we use, say, for example, for the most part, things like that. So you're basically, there's a framework of rules that you can kind of get people to adhere to, but there's also there's a flexibility for them to not just have to conform to a kind of unified standard. Like, we know there's individuality, so a spreadsheet heavy product is very different to a video related product. So like you can't just kind of go, okay, you take this and you've got to use this. And so I think what we do, as mentioned before, we just kind of try and guidance, adherence with kind of just principles and the use of tokens, components, that kind of thing. And I think working with those teams is, like, as Nicole mentioned, they're the subject matter experts, so we can kind of guide them. We have a kind of high level, broad view over the system and over the products, so the value and they've got the depth in those areas. So one of the things that we do, or the value that we bring often, is like connecting the dots, because we can see, oh, actually, if you find yourself getting siloed in this little group here, the other group over here is actually doing something quite similar. You should talk to each other, you should connect with them, you should leverage each other's thinking, their solutions, the challenges, all that type of stuff. But I think there's also the tension between the autonomy and kind of adherence. Teams want the freedom to be able to make custom experiences for their needs and the use case they have, but they also kind of like I suppose maybe there's something kind of I don't know, satisfying, or you can fall back on rules that you can take out the thinking. We can kind of go, well, actually it must be done this way. In some ways you can kind of go, right, I don't even need to think about that now, because I just have to follow this way. So there's this tension of like wanting the freedom. I think teams in certain areas, they do want that heavy guidance, as well as like, can you tell us the done way of doing this thing? So sometimes there's a tension there, like, because of like, well, you would probably know better than us in the product area you're working on, so we can give you a bit of a framework and some advice and stuff like that, but maybe what you come up with is something that we can share at a group level.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like in order to have a truly extensive system, there needs to be two-way communication between design system teams and those product teams. But it also sounds like those product teams need to have good visibility amongst each other to leverage the system in a way that it was intended. So how do these teams share in a community environment like that? Like, how are you all trying to enable that? Tom, we'll head back to you.
Yeah, sure. There's actually a few initiatives that have been kind of started up recently. Things like we're titled as a community garden, where we've got some of those scenarios where I mentioned, teams looking to leverage. So if Canvas is supplying the building blocks, that they're closer aligned, so they're trying to leverage the work between each other, because, as I mentioned, big organization, visibility is often a challenge. Being able to actually just it's actually just too much information to take in as well. Like, you know, if you try to take in every single product, but there's a few initiatives like that that are starting up, and how can we basically leverage each other's thinking? How can we avoid reinventing the wheel? How can we share kind of solutions to niche problems and stuff, and kind of copy each other's homework in a way, you know, because there are commonalities in some of the challenges. So there's a few initiatives like that are starting up, and they're kind of grassroots in the sense that there's a product teams kind of self-organizing, and we're kind of working with them in a way to kind of guide. Again, we're a small team, so we can't, you know, we need to kind of be very intentional and very careful about what we do, and everything needs to have a kind of a scalable multiplier effect. So if we can create some kind of artifact or some kind of way of doing things that can be consumed 1,000 times by 1,000 people, then that's good. So there's a few things like that happening at the moment.
Yeah, I like that concept of a community garden, which I know we're going to dig into in a little bit. Alex, what about from your end? How are teams sharing in this community environment?
Yeah, on the technology side, a lot of teams have started to kind of abstract out their components from their products. So previously they would just kind of build them all in the same repository, and now they're starting to follow a very similar model to what we use for Canvas Kit, our component library, where they have it built out in a monorepo, if you're familiar with that term, where it's kind of like a standalone set of components built in isolation. So they're really easy to, you know, quickly iterate on and test and publish, so that a variety of teams can use them. So it's kind of just nice to have a very familiar experience going from component library to component library, and they all kind of match the base one Canvas kits that everybody's used to using.
Yeah.
And then also through tooling. So if you follow me in Figma for a sec, I'll show you a quick screenshot of something that we released a few months ago.
Are you? Oh, there we go.
There we go. Cool. So yeah, this is something that we call Anthology. If anybody's familiar with Storybook, that's something that a lot of our product teams use at Workday to develop their components in isolation. And rather than trying to have designers and developers keep track of all of these different storybooks and have to like jump between them to try and find examples of existing components when they're trying to reuse something or find you know, pre-existing solutions, this makes use of a new feature that Storybook released called Composition, where it basically just compiles a bunch of different storybooks into one place, and you can search across multiple storybooks. So it makes tracking down like duplicate components or finding, you know, similar solutions to a design problem really, really quick and simple. And yeah, it's basically just there to encourage visibility and like a community model for sharing and building and maintaining components across Workday. It's maybe not as curated as we would like, but it's been a pretty valuable tool for people trying to figure out, you know, what components are available to them.
Yeah, I love that. Super cool.
Somebody just asked what the name of the feature was. It is Storybook Composition.
Good call out there.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Nicole, what about your end? How are we creating this community environment for teams to share?
Yeah, so similar to Storybook, in Figma, it's kind of like our design space. And like Tom mentioned about the community gardens, it's just been harder and harder to maintain that bird's eye view of everything that's going on. Like we had mentioned before, with just a number of teams and different products that exist now versus it did, you know, 7, 8 years ago. So I think the numbers today, I think we're about like a team of 15 or so on design systems, and then our larger org, there's about 200 designers, managers, and that. Yeah, just grown a lot, and that's gotten impossible to know like everything that's out there just based off how we're organized as well in Figma. Everyone has their own Figma team space, and you can kind of most people are good about just like having them open teams. So you can always feel free to go and check it out for yourselves and see what they're working on. But it's always like you're kind of spying, right? Like checking out like what they're working on. Previously there wasn't like a shared space where people could inform the other teams on what they were building, what was coming next in one place. Everything was just kind of spread out. So you have to go do the digging yourself and see what, you know, one team's working on versus another. So that community garden that Tom mentioned will help collect everything into one place in Figma, just to surface what is out there. And in turn, you know, when Tom also mentioned connecting the dots for our team, It'll help us also identify what patterns and any components are out there that may be good candidates to be contributed back to the design system, because they are being used in several places and are pretty generic patterns. And in that event, if they are contributed to Canvas, we would step in and help take on that maintenance too. So I think the best part of all this kind of community-driven sense of like gardening or collecting things in one space has really helped us kind of share the responsibility amongst the larger design org and reducing the scope of what we're responsible for. And then I think the biggest thing that designers that do contribute to that community garden know is that it's only successful if they do keep it maintained, if they do keep it up to date. So I think that's something that they acknowledge, and they're down to kind of sharing that responsibility along with us. So I think it's just been really great to see.
Yeah, there's both shared responsibility, and then there's a bit of like you're off on your own with a little bit of individual work, and you come back together. So there's that constant flow there. This is sort of related to the previous question, but how are y'all enabling other teams to create their own mini extended design systems? Alan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that's, there's a lot of good stuff there. So there's obviously the technology piece that we've talked about with being able to break down our components into pieces that people can consume. There's also but that was a bit of a mental model shift for our engineers. Instead of just taking these pre-made components and popping them into their application, and we wanted to instead, build things for builders. For engineers love to build and create, and designers do as well. And so we want to build components that developers love to use, and that they want to reach for before they reach for building their own components. But because it was a mental model shift, a lot of we needed to sort of explain the paradigm behind like where we're headed. And so we had a series of workshops where we trained about I think it was like 45 developers across it was like three cohorts, one in like Mountain Time, and one in the Pacific or like West Coast, and then like a European group, and just training them on like how to use these new components, these new paradigms, just so that they know how to get the most out of our components, and sort of know which level to dive in. There's also the like, aside from the technology piece, we found that teams are part of them feeling empowered is also about their individual communities and where they're at. And those grassroots communities are really important for them to feel successful. And so we've hired a dev advocate, Will, who is really helping our contribution process, but also meeting with teams and like understanding their needs. We've also, and so it's like basically like fostering those communities and like helping them grow is the idea. And so like helping teams individually, but also groups of teams sort of collaborate together so that they can get there. We also have metrics tooling, a lot of things that we're starting to build out now, to where we can identify these burgeoning systems that we may or may not know about, because the ecosystem is so large, but we can sort of see teams that are starting to build out these new libraries, and identify them, and then figure out, what were the pain points that sort of that like caused this to putter out, and how can we help these teams be successful, and have the tools they need to build an extended system that will multiply our effect throughout Workday.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about a lot around onboarding, and even having a key person to support some of that onboarding as well. Tom, let's go over to you.
Yeah, so if Will is the person that's kind of doing that driving that side of things from a development perspective, myself and if some others on the team are thinking about that from a design perspective as well. And I'm just looking at the question from Nina as well about, could you share more about injecting a design system designer into a team? So there's only so much time you have, and again, if we're talking about like 15 of us, including developers and engineers, to 200 designers and that kind of thing, they would love, the product teams would love as much time as possible, which is understandable. You know, you'd love to have a specialist on board to help you with, but I think one of the things that we do is it's trying to be clever, like the kind of big investment of time pairing with the learning team, say for example, being embedded with that team gave me me personally anyway, lots of understanding about universal challenges that you can. So if I talk to other teams, I can see the same things. So it's kind of like it's like talking to your customers, really. Like if you talk to your customers, you understand their pain points, if you understand their frustrations or things they don't understand, chances are you're going to get similar questions from other people. So I love doing that, talking to the teams, understanding what's not clear for you. Like, is there a mismatch of expectations? You know, and then if you're asking that question, or if you're thinking it, well, maybe there's probably many people thinking it, but you're the one who's asking it. So how do we take that knowledge, and how do we kind of go, right, let's share that with everyone else? So I guess it's kind of like a teacher in a classroom. If one student asks them the question, they may answer to everybody, so everyone can kind of get the value there. So we're trying to figure out how best to do that. You know, get the information, understand what people are asking, and then how can we you know, communicate to the team in a very scalable way. So recently we've been working a lot on kind of getting started with Canvas guidance, understanding, you know, with the learning and other teams that we worked with, we're kind of understanding their workflow and kind of giving them some tips on workflow and stuff in Figma, setting up component libraries in Figma, and then having them, you know, being very kind of systematic about it, taken a systematic lens that not everybody has that kind of way of thinking, you know, so just giving them little tips and that kind of thing, but also different videos, artifacts. We're thinking about setting up some training on onboarding, like actually walking through, answering a lot of questions, and kind of understanding their specific needs, and also if there's any knowledge gaps, or perhaps, you know, any areas that we can help fill in for them, for our community. So a few things like that are happening at the moment. So
yeah, cool, awesome. Well, we've already established that a key part of maturing your design system really relies on your community. And this is taking us to our final theme, last couple of questions here, empowering design system users. Can you all share what are the different ways that you keep your community involved and invested? We'll do about a minute per person, starting with Nicole.
Sure. So we always think showing rather than telling is more effective. And we've done, you know, hands-on Figma workshops in the past, weekly demos where we deep dived into specific topics and gave updates on any upcoming changes or what we're working on. And we've given them the chance to also ask us, you know, topics that they're interested in learning more about at any future demos. We've also recorded walkthroughs in case, you know, people can't show up, you know, to when we have these demos or workshops in person. So also trying to get people async to get caught up on our updates that way as well.
Yeah, nice. And Tom?
Yeah, well, just constantly learning about how we can empower teams. We don't have any researchers on our team on this call, but on this panel, but we have some great researchers on the team, and even actually they're helping to train us up on best, like from a design perspective, research related things that we can do. So really spending time understanding the problem spaces, understanding the needs. We also have some standing meetings like office hours. So on the Europe side, obviously we're kind of, the team is spread across from Dublin and over in North America as well. So on the Europe side, we do one every day for 30 minutes, and we get people come in. So it's great because you can kind of get, not all the questions are Canvas related. They're kind of like, some of them kind of like interaction related, and you're kind of, it's a good example. It's a good time to basically try to see where you can connect the dots for people as well. Like, so you might not have the exact answer for them, but you can say, hey, I would talk to this person, and you know, and you can follow up on it that kind of way. So a few other things like that, demos and that kind of thing. But I think yeah, that kind of
yeah, wow, office hours every day, that's like super intense, but I mean cool.
It's 30 minutes, it's okay.
Yeah. Alex, what about you?
I think one of the most important things is just keeping everybody excited about Canvas and using the design system. So, you know, whether that's just comms about new stuff that's coming out, but really just trying to provide like tools and resources that, you know, really like simplify or empower people's workflows. That's a really big focus of us. And when we, you know, sometimes releasing big stuff like that requires changes as things evolve over time, and we don't want to alienate any of our users. So we take a big chunk out of our time to make efforts towards making upgrades as smooth as possible too. So if we've got major upgrades with breaking code changes, we put a lot of time into our migration guides, and we offer code mods to make like automatic upgrading as simple as possible. So it really encourages everybody to kind of stay on the bleeding edge, and we try to kind of drive the whole UI development organization at Workday forward with the stuff that we're doing with Canvas. Just so everybody's really excited to work with it every day.
Yeah, nice. And then what about you, Alan?
Yeah, I think like echoing the excitement piece. I think like as your design system, when you're small, it's like easy to push things out. But as you get to a large scale, pushing your return on investment, it just takes a lot more effort to push. And so it's better to spend your effort pulling people in. And so for developers, that means that we, again, like we try to build things that the developers are really excited about. And when we when we build tools and things that help them, we try to share those things, and we try to keep it very all of our communication very focused on, we're building things that make your life better. So, docs are wonderful, and we're spending a lot of time revamping our docs, but we've also spent a lot of time putting documentation in the code so that when a person is using a particular component, they'll get a little tooltip that pops up, and the documentation is right there in front of them, so they don't ever have to change their context. So those little like small friction pieces that make developers' lives easier are huge wins for our design system.
Yeah, I love that. And now in our final question, we're going to do rapid fire. I'm curious to hear what design system initiatives are top of mind for you all. So let's start with Tom.
The community garden side of things. So really working on that. How can we connect the dots for people? How can we be more efficient? How can we learn from our users in the community? Yeah, I think that's a quick fire answer for me, I think.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, onboarding and education is a really, really big one. We've got a new documentation site actually coming out at the end of the year, which we've had a ton of focus going into over the last 6 to 12 months. If anybody's checking out design.workday.com, it's basically a new version of that site going up on canvas.workday.com. So keep an eye out for that in the coming feature. That'll just kind of like bring together all of our content and include a lot of the new getting started content that Tom was noting. I spoke earlier about kind of evolving our tokens and kind of systematizing them. So we've done that with a few of our tokens where they've kind of evolved into a token system, but we haven't done it across the board yet. And obviously those are pretty impactful changes. So the sooner we can get through those, the better. So just kind of continuing to iterate on that. And then finally, just continuing to build the community with extended systems and making sure that kind of initiative and concept is a success within Workday.
Yeah, cool. Alan?
Yeah, patterns are huge. Developers are wanting more information and more guidance on not just how to use individual components, but how to build patterns together. And so that sort of guidance is really important, especially as components are becoming more flexible. They sort of provide that through line that helps it feel cohesive. Yeah. Community building, which we've talked about a lot, is super important. That's one of our big pushes this year. And metrics and infrastructure. As our community continues to grow, we can't rely on our intuition and individual conversations. We have to have data informed. We need to make data informed decisions about how we move forward, and then also understanding where our consumers are at, where people who are using our design system are at. So, yeah.
Ah, nice. And then lastly, Nicole.
Okay, so these are just like ideas. We haven't even like started working on them. I don't even know how we're gonna do it, but I think it'd be great to see like a pattern gallery of like the gold standard of like how teams have implemented solutions for their specific use case that ties it together, our Canvas pattern documentation. But you actually see, the actual examples in product, And then teams can go really deep in terms of like how they built it, what the use case was and all that stuff. And then there's been interest in having design system gigs. So maybe some app designers taking on a part-time gig on the Canvas team to kind of learn by doing, whether it's contributing a component or contributing documentation. That's also been something that we've been hearing people have some interest in. I'd be interested in seeing how that plays out.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. Well, that wraps up our time together. A huge thank you to our panelists for sharing your work and walking us through your design system journey. If you're wanting to dig into some of that documentation that they mentioned, head on over to design.workday.com to take a peek. There's lots of great reference material there. And to continue the conversation, Figma is hosting a design system conference next week on October 7th. So if you're interested in attending, visit schema.figma.com for more info. And finally, thank you all for attending. Even though we didn't have time for Q&A, we'll be sure to check out the Miro board for any questions that came up, and we'll do our best to answer them there. So with that, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you
you
so
Everybody,
much.
thanks for hosting us, Clara. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.